I arrested my own wife for DUI. She accused me of cheating, but hidden footage, fake texts, and a lipstick in my patrol car revealed a dark plot to destroy my life. They don't warn you in the academy that sometimes the people you're sworn to protect are the ones who can rip your world apart. I'd seen wrecked cars, bloody faces, and dying men whisper their last words into my hands, but nothing prepared me for the night my badge and my marriage collided. It began like any other late patrol, the hum of the cruiser steady beneath me, radio chatter fading into the background. Then I spotted it, a black Hyundai weaving recklessly through lanes, pushing 95 on the open highway. The kind of call you write up, log, and forget by morning. But when the car finally yielded to my lights, easing onto the shoulder, my gut twisted with something darker than routine. The door swung open, and out she stumbled. My wife. My wife. Eyes glassy, hair wild, swaying on unsteady legs. A whiskey-soaked stranger in the skin of the woman I once loved. For a heartbeat, I thought she might break down in shame. Instead, she lunged at me like a cornered animal, nails flashing, spitting rage. "You cheating bastard!" Her voice tore the night open. I staggered back, stunned, my mind blank. I tried to restrain her gently, murmuring her name, begging her to stop. But her fists pounded my chest, her fingers clawed for my eyes. Duty overrode heartbreak, and with trembling hands, I forced the cuffs on her. The metallic click echoed louder than any gunshot I'd ever heard. She screamed all the way to the station, her words carving into me. Our marriage was over. I was a liar, a fraud. She refused to say why, only hurled accusations like stones. My chest ached as I drove, the flashing dashboard lights reflecting off her tear-streaked cheeks. Was this another breakdown? A spiral into madness? I told myself it had to be. But when we entered the station and her gaze locked on a photo pinned to the wall, Susan's photo, my coworker's photo, her fury sharpened. That's her. That's the one you're screwing. The room tilted. Susan, my partner on patrol, nothing more? I tried, God knows I tried, to reason with my wife, to peel back the delusion. Hours passed, my words turning to dust against her silence. She wouldn't listen. She sat in that cell, clutching her rage like a weapon. I finally left hollow, knowing dawn would bring no answers. And it didn't. The next morning, Susan found me in the break room, eyes wide, concern painted across her face. "Your wife is saying crazy things," she whispered. "What can I do?" I seized the chance. Tell her the truth. Tell her nothing ever happened. We walked to the cell together. Susan stood tall, hands raised in surrender. But before she could speak, my wife sneered, her voice thick with venom. "Don't bother lying. I found your lipstick in his patrol car." Susan blanched, stepping back as if struck. And then her parents stormed in, her father's finger jabbing my chest, her mother sobbing accusations of betrayal. My world shrank to the cell, the shouting, the watching eyes of the entire station. Even the chief stood in the doorway, arms crossed. Susan tried to diffuse the storm, but her voice trembled. "We're just colleagues." Her father's eyes blazed. "We know about the late shifts, the texts. Jessica showed us everything." My pulse roared in my ears. Texts? What texts? I'd never messaged Susan outside of work. I grabbed for my phone, scrolling frantically. Empty. Nothing. January 15th, February 3rd, March 22nd. My wife hissed through the bars. "Want me to keep going?" I couldn't breathe. Susan laid a hand on my shoulder, soft but useless. "Maybe someone spoofed your number," her father snarled, demanding her release. The sergeant cut in flatly. She'd blown a no-9. She was facing charges. They could wait for the hearing. Her mother spat the word imprisonment like poison. Through the chaos, Susan leaned close, voice barely audible. "Go home, check on your son. You can't win this battle right now." I left on legs that barely held me, hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles blanched. The house was too quiet when I opened the door. Ethan was curled on the couch in pajamas, small against the vastness of the living room. "Dad," he whispered, eyes wide. Mom was crying. Is she okay? I sat beside him, my throat burning, searching for words that didn't exist. "Mom made a mistake, Ethan," I said softly, my voice breaking as I sat beside him on the couch. "She shouldn't have driven last night, but she's safe. She's just upset." He stared at me, wide-eyed, his small hands twisting the hem of his shirt. "She kept talking about Miss Susan on the phone with Grandma." The words struck like a blade. My pulse stalled. "You know Susan?" He nodded quickly. "Yeah, she came by once when you were working late. She brought cookies. Mom got mad after she left. Really mad." My mouth went dry. "When was this?" "I don't know, maybe 2 months ago." He shrugged, but the memory was etched on his face. "Mom threw the cookies in the trash. Then she cried in the kitchen. A lot." I stood, pacing, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Did Susan say anything to her?" Ethan frowned. "They talked at the door for a while. Mom was upset after." The pieces shifted uneasily, jagged puzzle parts that refused to fit. I fled to the patrol car, searching desperately, Ethan's eyes following me through the window. And there it was, a tube of lipstick tucked under the passenger seat. A color I had never seen Susan wear in all the years I'd known her. Back inside, my phone buzzed, a message from Susan. "Your wife made bail. Her parents paid. I tried to calm things down for you, but she wouldn't listen. They're headed to the house now. I'm so sorry this is happening." I stared at the text, dread crawling up my spine. My thumbs moved before my mind caught up. "Why didn't you ever tell me you came to my house?" Silence. 5 minutes. 10. Then her reply flickered on screen. "I just wanted to drop off shift schedules. I didn't know it would upset her." My stomach dropped into my shoes. We hadn't had paper schedules in 2 years. Before I could process the lie, I heard car doors slam outside. My hands trembled as I moved to the front window. Through the peephole, I saw Jessica flanked by her parents like soldiers marching into battle. Her eyes were swollen, her hair still disheveled from the cell. My chest tightened as I opened the door. She didn't speak. She shoved past me, heading straight for Ethan. Her father's finger stabbed into my chest, sharp enough to bruise. "You're going to explain. Now." I forced my tone calm for Ethan's sake, but the tension in the room was a live wire. Jessica dropped to her knees and gathered our son into her arms. He clung to her, sobbing. "Mommy," he whimpered, pressing his face into her neck. Jessica's eyes burned over his head, pure hatred aimed at me like a gun barrel. I whispered for Ethan to go to his room, but he only held her tighter. My mother-in-law advanced, fury trembling through her voice as she ticked accusations off on her fingers. The text, the lipstick, Susan bringing cookies. You expect us to believe this is coincidence? I tried over and over to explain. I didn't send any texts. I don't know about the lipstick. Liar, Jessica's father snarled, cutting me off each time. Jessica rose slowly, Ethan still wrapped around her. With her free hand, she unlocked her phone and shoved the screen at me. Text after text filled the display. My number at the top, my name attached to flirty, intimate words I had never typed. Can't wait to see you again. You looked beautiful last night. My vision swam. These aren't mine. They can't be. I pulled out my phone, opening the thread with Susan. Nothing but a few dull scheduling notes, months old. Jessica saw my empty screen and let out a piercing scream. Deleted! You deleted them to hide it. Her father leaned in, face scarlet, spittle hitting my cheek. I'll call the phone company myself. We'll get the real records. The room spun with voices, with disbelief. My son was trembling, crying harder, burying himself against Jessica's shoulder. My mother-in-law's words sliced through the chaos. I knew something was wrong when you started working all those late shifts. And then Jessica snapped. She grabbed a glass from the coffee table and hurled it against the wall. It exploded into shards, skittering across the floor. Ethan screamed, his little body convulsing in her arms. I realized in that blinding moment that this wasn't just an argument anymore. This was a war inside my own home, and the person bleeding first was my son. "I'll give you space," I said finally, voice hoarse. "One night apart. Maybe we'll all calm down." Jessica's eyes blazed. "If you walk out that door, it's proof. Proof you're guilty." Her parents nodded like judges passing a sentence. "Leaving only shows you're a cheater," her father spat. But Ethan was trembling in Jessica's arms, hiccuping through tears, and I knew someone in this storm had to think clearly. It had to be me. I turned toward the bedroom, every step dragging like lead. I grabbed a duffel from the closet, tossing in clothes, my phone charger, anything within reach. Jessica followed close, her voice rising, each accusation cutting sharper than the last. "You're destroying this family for her, for that woman at work." "I didn't," I whispered, shoving the zipper closed. Nothing happened. She didn't hear me, she wouldn't. Her father planted himself in the doorway, arms crossed, daring me to move. I pushed past, his insults raining down. Coward, liar, disgrace. By the time I reached the car, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely fit the key in the ignition. Behind me, Jessica's scream cut through the night. "Our marriage is over!" I drove blind, the road a blur of white lines and neon signs until I pulled into an empty parking lot. My chest heaved, breath ragged. I dialed the one person who might help. Daniel, our union rep. He answered on the third ring. I poured it all out. The arrest, the accusations, the lipstick, the texts I'd never written. Daniel's voice was steady, calm. "Document everything. Don't speak to anyone at the department about this, not even casually. Write down every single detail about Susan. The chief's going to pull you off the street, mark my words. But if we build a record, we'll protect you." I thanked him and kept driving until a flickering motel sign lured me off the highway. The room reeked of cigarettes, the sheets felt damp, and the mattress sagged like it had carried too many secrets. I dropped onto the bed, pulled out a notebook, and began to write. I wrote about Susan's hand on my shoulder whenever she spoke to me, lingering just long enough to unsettle. About how she somehow knew of Jessica's arrest before anyone else, arriving at the station in perfect timing. About the overtime shifts she volunteered for, always aligning with mine. I wrote about the coffee she'd placed on my cruiser's hood one morning without asking, the laughter at my dullest jokes, the way she always sat beside me during briefings despite plenty of open chairs. 3 pages later, my hand ached. My stomach churned as the pattern came into focus. Had I been blind, or had I just not wanted to see it? Then Ethan's memory stabbed me again. The cookie visit. Susan at my front door for 12 whole minutes speaking with Jessica, leaving chaos behind. Susan lying about dropping off paper schedules we hadn't used in years. The truth pressed down on me like a weight I couldn't shake. My phone buzzed. Text from Jessica. Venom spilling across the screen. Names, accusations, the word divorce flashing like a verdict. I didn't answer. Anything I wrote would only dig the hole deeper. Morning light leaked through the grimy curtains when the phone rang again. Daniel. "The department's putting you on modified duty," he said without preamble. "Chief's worried about liability if you're out on patrol distracted. Makes sense, but I know it stings." Stings? It felt like another blade slipping between my ribs. "Come to my office at 10, he continued. "We'll get ahead of this. Protect your job and your name." When I arrived, Daniel already had a yellow legal pad filled with scribbles. He leaned across the desk, mapping out each step like a war general. "First," he said, "we get your phone records. If those texts never existed, we prove it." He dialed the carrier right then, filing the official request, citing departmental investigation. I watched him, pulse hammering, clinging to the one lifeline left, cold, hard evidence. Then he flipped to his calendar, circled a date 2 days away. Internal Affairs wants to talk. Be ready. The words made my stomach drop. Internal Affairs? The one place truth could either save me or bury me alive. Daniel spent the next hour drilling me like I was already on the witness stand. Facts only, he kept saying. Don't guess. Don't speculate. Don't try to explain Susan's motives. You'll only dig your own grave. Stick to what you know. I nodded, but his words rang hollow in my head. Because deep down, what I wanted most were the whys. Why Susan had stepped into my home. Why my wife believed her so easily. Why my life was unraveling in front of me. That evening, I couldn't fight the pull. I drove past the house. From the street, I saw Jessica's parents' car still parked in the driveway, the lights blazing in every window like a stage where my name was the only subject of discussion. I sat there, engine idling, picturing them inside. Jessica crying, her parents fanning the flames, my son listening to whispers through thin walls. I texted her, "Can I at least call Ethan?" Just to say goodnight. 3 hours of silence. Then finally 2 words. He's asleep. I looked at the clock, barely 7 p.m. The lie was obvious, but calling her out would only pour gas on a fire already raging. Back in the motel, I opened my notebook again. Page after page, I mapped out Susan's orbit around me. Every overlap, every coincidence. The overtime shifts she volunteered for the moment I signed up. The way she always claimed the chair beside me in briefings. The coffee left on my cruiser hood once a week like clockwork. The sandwiches from the deli she somehow knew I loved. All the tiny things that seemed harmless in the moment but strung together on paper formed something undeniable. How had I not seen it? Or worse, had I chosen not to? The next morning, I went to the station to sign the paperwork for my modified duty. The building felt colder. Colleagues I'd bled beside, people I thought were brothers and sisters, avoided my eyes. The desk sergeant, usually quick with a joke, barely grunted as he slid the forms toward me. The silence told me everything. Jessica's accusations were no longer private. My shame was public record. 2 days later, I found myself in the sterile gray of the Internal Affairs interview room. Across the table sat Paul, a man I'd only shaken hands with once at a department barbecue. He didn't waste time on pleasantries. Question after question, his voice steady, his pen scratching the page. My working relationship with Susan, the boundaries of our partnership, the nights we shared a cruiser. We were partners, nothing more, I repeated. But his eyes flicked back to his folder like he was reading a script I'd never seen. Then why, he asked, sliding papers across the table. Did she visit your home with cookies? The folder gaped open, and there they were, the screenshots. The same ones Jessica had shoved in my face, my name attached to words I never wrote. I never sent these, I said firmly, my throat raw. Check her phone. Check for apps that spoof numbers. Anything. I never sent these. Emlan's expression never changed. He wrote, nodded, flipped the page. No flicker of belief, no hint of doubt. Just the blank face of a man who might hold my career in his pen. 2 hours later, I stumbled out into the parking lot, mind churning. That's when Ethan's words came back to me like a whisper through static. They talked at the door for a long time. I froze, pulled out my phone, and called Daniel. We need to know what Susan said to Jessica that day. We need proof. He rang me back 10 minutes later. Neighbors, doorbell cams. See if anyone caught it. I didn't waste a second. I drove straight back to my neighborhood, knocking on doors like a desperate man begging for scraps. The first 2 houses had nothing. No cameras or footage long deleted. My stomach sank with each polite refusal. Then came Mr. Kenneth. White guy. Quiet. Meticulous. He nodded when I asked and led me into his office. Everything I record gets backed up, he said. His fingers flew over the keyboard, pulling up archives like he was conjuring ghosts. We scrolled through days of February, the hum of his computer the only sound in the room. 20 minutes ticked by, my nerves fraying with each second. And then, there she was. Susan. On screen. Standing at my front door with a plastic container in her hands. Cookies. The footage froze on Mr. Kenneth's monitor, the timestamp blinking like a warning light. 12 full minutes. 12 minutes of Susan at my door, a plastic container clutched to her chest. That wasn't a delivery. That was a conversation, a negotiation, a seed planted. Wait, Kenneth murmured, scrolling back. Another clip appeared. My driveway, my patrol car, a shadowed figure leaning in through the passenger door, hands moving deliberately inside. The face stayed hidden, but the posture was unmistakable. Someone tampering. My stomach flipped. Send me both clips, I said, voice tight. Please, right now. He transferred the files, and I must have thanked him 50 times before bolting out the door. My hands shook as I forwarded everything to Daniel with a text. This is what we've been looking for. His reply came fast. Exactly what we need. Sending it to IA with a formal request to investigate Susan. For the first time in weeks, a small ember of hope flickered. Maybe someone would finally believe me. That night, around 9, my phone rang. Jessica's father. He didn't even let me speak. His voice roared through the line, venomous. If you don't drop this nonsense about Susan and let Jessica come home, I'll go to every news station in town. You're a dirty cop. You arrested your own wife to cover an affair. I thumbed the speaker button and hit record, just like Daniel had warned. The threat spilled out for 10 minutes straight, a stream of bile and ultimatums. When he finally hung up, I saved the file and shot it to Daniel with shaking fingers. The next morning, the call I'd been waiting for came. Internal Affairs. They wanted me at the station immediately. Paul met me at the door. We've called Susan in for questioning, he said, tone unreadable. We're also performing a full forensic sweep of your patrol car. Turn it in. Without a car, I couldn't even work modified duty. Not officially suspended, but sidelined just the same. Amlan warned the process would take at least a week. I left the station in a fog, called Daniel from the parking lot. He didn't hesitate. Hire a family lawyer now, someone who understands cops. He gave me a name, Kimberly, specialist in custody disputes involving law enforcement. I drove straight to her office downtown, the city blurring past my window. Kimberly was brisk, sharp-eyed, flipping through my documentation like she was shuffling cards in a stacked deck. Jessica's instability and the false accusations give us leverage, she said flatly. We'll request supervised visitation. The words hit like a punch. Supervised? To see my own son? It's the only way to guarantee you have access to him while this unfolds, she said, already drafting the paperwork. This protects you, and it protects Ethan. We filed the motion the next day, requesting 2 supervised visits a week. Kimberly argued Jessica's drinking and erratic behavior made her unpredictable around Ethan. The clerk stamped the papers, promising a hearing within 2 weeks. 3 days later, Milan called again. The forensics team had finished with my car. The lipstick tube? I asked. No clear fingerprints, he said. Just partial smudges, could belong to anyone. But we did find traces of a perfume that doesn't match anything your wife owns. My grip on the phone tightened. How do you even know what perfume she uses? We got a warrant to test items from your house. This thing was growing tentacles, reaching into every corner of my life. But the real break came a week later. The phone company records arrived. Daniel called, practically shouting. They're clean, he said. Not one text sent from your number to Susan's on any of the dates Jessica claimed. Not one. This is a setup, clear as day. The relief hit me like a wave, followed instantly by nausea. Someone had built this lie brick by brick, and I had walked right into it. Daniel moved fast, filing copies with Internal Affairs and sending everything to Kimberly for the custody case. Jessica's lawyer tried to block the evidence, arguing it was obtained improperly, but the judge overruled him. For the first time since that night on the highway, I felt a crack in the darkness. A path, faint but real, leading out. For the first time, the tide seemed to be shifting. The doorbell footage, the lipstick, the fabricated text, it was all pointing in one direction. Someone had set me up. Susan had been quietly shifted to another schedule while the investigation continued, but I heard whispers from the hallways. She was painting me as unstable, claiming I was dragging her into my marital disaster. Let her talk. The evidence was louder than any rumor. Internal Affairs widened their net, digging into Susan's past and combing through every complaint, every minor note in her file. Kimberly was thrilled. "This is exactly what we need for family court," she told me. "It proves you're the one under attack, not the one betraying vows." All I cared about was seeing Ethan. The supervised visitation hearing was scheduled for Monday, and the entire weekend I rehearsed the words I wanted to say. Sunday night I ironed my best suit, though my hands trembled so badly the creases came out uneven. That Monday morning, the courthouse walls felt like they were closing in. Jessica sat stiff-backed on the opposite bench, her parents flanking her like bodyguards. I could barely recognize the woman I married behind those bloodshot eyes and hollow cheeks. The hearing was over in less than 20 minutes. The judge scanned our documents, listened to both sides, and finally granted me supervised visits twice a week at the community center. But then Jessica's lawyer stood, sliding a fresh stack of papers forward. His voice rang out. "Emergency protective order. My client believes she's being harassed by Mr. Sparks investigating her claims." For a moment, the floor fell out beneath me, but Kimberly was already on her feet, fire in her eyes. "Your Honor, here's the truth," she said, thrusting forward the phone records, the falsified text, the footage. "This man is not harassing anyone. He's defending himself from falsehoods." The judge's gavel cracked like thunder. "Protective order denied. He has the right to clear his name." Jessica's parents whispered furiously to their attorney, their faces twisted with frustration. I walked out of that courtroom feeling both vindicated and utterly hollow. 2 days later, mediation. A small beige conference room with a single oval table. Jessica sat silent, her father answering every question before she could open her mouth. Her mother's hand clamped around her arm each time she shifted forward to speak. 40 minutes in, the mediator closed her folder with a sigh. "Mrs. Sparks doesn't appear able to speak freely with her parents present. I'm recommending individual counseling." It was the first time anyone besides me had seen it. The strings her parents pulled. That afternoon, another twist. A text from Susan. "I'm sorry about everything. I hope we can talk soon." I felt bile rise in my throat. I sent the screenshot to Daniel immediately. His response was blunt. "Save it. Block her number." I did, and I did it with shaking hands. The next morning, Milan called. Internal Affairs had finally questioned Susan. She denied everything, insisting her gestures were nothing more than friendliness between colleagues. But her story was full of cracks, especially about the cookie visit. Her reasons kept shifting, details changing with every retelling. Friday arrived, my first supervised visit. I walked into the community center's bright room, lined with books and toys, my heart pounding like I was about to run a marathon. Then the door opened. Ethan bolted toward me, tears streaming, arms flung around my neck. "Dad, when are you coming home?" My chest caved in. "I don't know, buddy, but I love you. I'll always love you." We sat on the floor building Legos, reading his favorite books. The supervisor scribbled notes in the corner, silent witness to the wreckage of my family. Ethan told me Mom cried all the time, and Grandma called me a bad man. I bit back the urge to question further, jotting it into my notebook later instead. When the session ended, Ethan clung to me, screaming not to let go. The supervisor had to peel him away. I sat in my car for 20 minutes afterward, gripping the steering wheel until the tears finally came. That evening, Emlan called with the breakthrough I'd been waiting for. Susan accessed the evidence room 3 days before she showed up at your house, pulled old schedules, printed them. My breath caught. How old? 6 months. She tried to pass them off as current. It destroys her entire story. The world tilted. For the first time, Susan's lies weren't just suspected, they were documented. The mask was slipping. At last, the pieces were locking together. Susan's printouts, the lipstick, the fake texts, the whole lattice of deceit. Now, finally, there was hard proof she had plotted something and lied about it. Monday morning, the chief summoned me to his office. His blinds were drawn, his coffee untouched. He looked exhausted, the weight of city politics hanging from his shoulders. "This is a mess, Sparks," he said, voice low. "A major problem for the department. I'll be fair, but you need to understand. If Susan crossed lines, there'll be consequences. For everyone. Policy changes, scrutiny. The council's already sniffing around." I left feeling more wrung out than when I'd gone in. Vindication didn't feel like victory. It felt like waiting for another shoe to drop. Wednesday came. Jessica's DUI arraignment. She stood before the judge, pale and fragile, her lawyer trying to spin her drunk driving as an act of emotional distress. Our marital breakdown to blame. The judge wasn't having it. "A blood alcohol level of 19 is lethal, no matter the circumstances," he said flatly. "Drunk driving endangers lives. Full stop." He ordered an alcohol assessment and mandatory treatment as part of her plea deal. Jessica stared at the floor, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her, like a child caught sneaking out of school. That afternoon, I went to my first therapy session, Kimberly's recommendation. I sat stiffly on the edge of the couch, words stuck in my throat. But an hour later, I walked out lighter. The therapist didn't look at me like a liar. She said what I already suspected but needed to hear. Someone had deliberately tried to destroy my marriage and my career. She called Susan's actions calculated manipulation, not mere misunderstanding. She gave me breathing techniques, mental ground to stand on when the uncertainty hit. For the first time in weeks, my head felt clear. But clarity didn't stop the wreckage. 3 days later, a knock at my door. My neighbor stood there holding his laptop, his expression grim. "You'd better see this," he said. He opened another doorbell clip, timestamped the morning of Jessica's arrest. A white Honda Civic idling outside our house at 6 a.m., 2 hours before Susan's shift. The camera caught the license plate, clear as day. My stomach lurched. I knew those numbers. It was a Civic I'd seen in the department's parking lot. The footage showed the car sitting there for 20 long minutes just watching our house before pulling away. I thanked him, though the words tasted like dust, and called Daniel immediately. His voice was steady. "Document everything, file a formal complaint tonight." I spent the next 2 hours hunched over my kitchen table, writing up everything Susan had done. The lies about the schedules, the cookies, the fake text, the lipstick. Daniel combed through it afterward, adding citations to policy violations, ensuring every detail was airtight. Together, we sent the full report to Internal Affairs with the evidence attached. The union president called me himself the next morning. "We're behind you," he said. "Legal support, whatever you need." Then Emolan rang with yet another revelation. "We've been combing through computer logs. Susan accessed the patrol car assignment system 17 times in 6 months, always making sure she was paired with you." I gripped the phone tighter. 17 times? "She also pulled your personnel file back in January," he continued. "She had no authority to do that. We're building a case for stalking and harassment. This is far beyond workplace misconduct." The air left my lungs. This wasn't just a smear campaign, it was obsession. That afternoon, Jessica's mother called me, her voice cracked with sobs. "I'm so sorry," she kept saying, words tumbling over themselves. "What happened?" I asked quietly. She said she'd seen the evidence, every clip, every record. She admitted maybe they'd been wrong about me. "I just wanted what was best for Ethan," she whispered. Maybe? Maybe we made a mistake. I swallowed hard. Then think about what's real because our son needs both of us thinking clearly. She cried harder. Jessica's drinking again. She won't listen to anyone. 2 nights later, the phone rang at 1 a.m. Jessica. Her voice was thick with alcohol, lurching between rage and despair. I don't know what's real anymore, she screamed, then began to sob. I don't know what's real. I sat there in the dark motel room, phone pressed to my ear, listening to the woman who had once been my anchor dissolve into static and tears. The worst part was, I still loved her, and she was crumbling under someone else's lie. Her voice cracked through the line, broken by sobs. I don't know what's real anymore, Jessica whispered, slurring. Then came words that made my blood run cold. Susan. She showed me messages on her phone, but I was already drunk. Maybe I couldn't see right. I sat up straight, gripping the receiver tighter. What did you just say? She came to the house that day, Jessica muttered. She had a phone in her hand, said it was yours. But I'd been drinking since noon. Maybe it wasn't. I hit record on my laptop, capturing every shaky word. She rambled, spiraling between confusion and regret, admitting she no longer trusted her own memory. For the first time, the cracks in her certainty showed, and behind them the truth began to bleed through. The following week brought our first family court hearing. The judge ordered a temporary separation agreement. Ethan would stay with me Friday nights through Sunday evenings. Not nearly enough, but Kimberly assured me it was standard. Routine is what he needs, she said. Stability. The judge looked us both in the eye. Your son's well-being comes first, above everything else. 2 days later, Ethan's school counselor called us in. His grades had dropped, his anxiety was spiking, he cried randomly in class. Jessica sat across from me at the table, hollow-eyed, her parents conspicuously absent. For once, there was no screaming, no accusations, just quiet nods as we agreed to counseling, extra support, and a plan to show Ethan stability, even if it was a fragile truce. For a fleeting moment, it felt like we might still stand together for him, but the illusion shattered that Thursday. I was leaving therapy when I saw her, Susan, striding across the parking lot, eyes fixed on me like a predator closing in. My chest tightened, but before she reached me, Daniel stepped out from the shadows. You need to leave, now. Susan froze, her mask slipping. Then she spun on her heel and bolted to her car. Daniel's jaw was tight. She's been waiting an hour, security told me. He'd been shadowing me ever since the union warned Susan might try to corner me. That evening, Emlon called with the kind of news that sent a jolt of adrenaline through my veins. We pulled metadata from Susan's phone. She had an app installed, Text Now. Lets you send messages from fake numbers. She deleted it the day after Jessica's arrest. We're working with the company to recover the data. I gripped the phone, heart pounding. So it was her. This is the smoking gun, he said. Give us a few weeks, we'll have everything. That weekend, I laid it all out in order. Every shred of evidence, every timestamp. Phone records proving I never sent a single text. Doorbell videos catching Susan at my door, and again lurking outside my patrol car. The lie about paper schedules. The computer logs showing she pulled my personnel file and manipulated assignments. Now, the deleted messaging app. Page by page, video by video, I built the timeline. A map of months of obsession and sabotage. Kimberly looked it over with sharp eyes. This isn't coincidence. This is orchestration. And now we can show it. She scheduled a meeting for Tuesday at her office. Bring everything, she said. We're going to put it all on the table. I arrived early, nervous energy driving me to arrange the documents in perfect order across the conference table. Kimberly tested the laptop, the doorbell footage ready to play on command. The air in the room crackled with the weight of what we'd gathered. 20 minutes late, Jessica walked in with her parents. Her eyes were swollen, rimmed in red, tissues balled in her fist. She looked wrecked, Her shoulders slumped, her spirit frayed thin. Her father sat opposite me, arms crossed like stone, his glare a blade across the table. Her mother clutched Jessica's hand, rubbing circles across her back, whispering something into her ear. And I sat there, staring at the people who had once been family, waiting for the moment the lies finally collided with the truth. Kimberly didn't waste a second. She began methodically, sliding the phone records across the table and tapping each date Jessica had cited, her voice steady but sharp. "No text between my client and Susan," she said. "Not on these days, not on any days." Jessica's father shook his head like a metronome, lips pressed thin, but I noticed Jessica's mother leaning closer. Her eyes flicked back and forth over the pages, her fingers trembling as she traced the dates. Then came the doorbell footage. Susan on our porch for 12 full minutes. The quick drop-off stretched into undeniable evidence. Jessica's mother gasped, reaching for the supporting documents Kimberly slid forward. The switch to digital schedules 2 years ago. Her hands shook as she read the print. The second video played, a shadow leaning into my patrol car that same day. The person's face hidden, but their movements deliberate as they placed something under the passenger seat. Next, the forensics report. Lipstick with no identifiable fingerprints, but laced with a perfume Jessica had never used. The metadata from Susan's deleted messaging app, Text Now, flashed on the screen. Jessica's mother began to cry. Not angry tears this time, but something softer, heavier. Grief and regret rolled together. She kept looking between me and her daughter as though some veil had been lifted. Her father sat rigid, jaw tight, but even he couldn't argue when Kimberly laid out the patrol car assignment logs, highlighting how Susan had repeatedly manipulated the system to partner with me. 2 hours passed like this, evidence stacking higher and higher, each piece dismantling the story that had nearly ruined my life. Then Jessica spoke for the first time. Her voice was small. "I'll go into treatment," she said quietly, "if you stop the investigation." Kimberly cut in immediately, tone firm but not unkind. "That's not how it works. Internal Affairs is handling Susan separately. This isn't leverage, this is accountability." Jessica's mother rose suddenly and walked around the table toward me. I tensed, bracing for a slap, another scream. Instead, she placed a hand on my shoulder. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "for not believing you." I stared at her, stunned. Jessica's father still didn't apologize, but his voice cracked as he told Jessica, "You need help. We should stop fighting him." It was more than I'd ever expected from him. Jessica nodded slowly. She agreed to an intensive outpatient program, 3 sessions a week. She promised to stop telling people I'd been unfaithful, at least while the investigation continued. It wasn't forgiveness, and the suspicion still lived in her eyes, but at least Ethan wouldn't hear the poison at home anymore. 3 days later, Milan called. Internal Affairs had completed their preliminary review. No evidence of any inappropriate relationship between me and Susan. They strongly recommended I be reassigned a day shift to avoid future contact. I accepted without hesitation. I just wanted to stop being the cautionary tale whispered about in hallways. That same afternoon, the chief summoned Susan. She emerged with a formal reprimand and an immediate reassignment to the North Precinct. Within an hour, the station buzzed with the news. She was finished here. She cleaned out her locker while I was out on patrol so we wouldn't cross paths. Later, guys told me she didn't say goodbye to anyone, just walked out with a box of her belongings, eyes fixed ahead. Jessica began her treatment program the following Monday. Her counselor told me she was showing up, participating, trying. About 2 weeks in, her therapist called me, asking if I'd be willing to attend joint sessions to work on co-parenting. Every instinct told me to say no, but Ethan needed something resembling normalcy, even if that meant sitting across from Jessica again. So I agreed. During our 3rd joint session with both therapists present, Jessica finally said the words I'd been waiting to hear. She admitted Susan had come to the house that day, drunk by noon, showing her messages on a phone, claiming I was harassing her at work and wouldn't leave her alone. Hearing it out loud didn't feel like vindication. It felt like a wound being reopened, only this time with everyone watching. Jessica's voice cracked as she stared at the therapist's table. When Susan showed me those messages with his name at the top, I didn't think. I just believed it. The therapist leaned in gently. Why do you think you were so quick to believe? Jessica's tears spilled over. Because I already felt like he was pulling away. All those late shifts. All the overtime. I thought he didn't want to be here anymore. And instead of asking, I drank. And then I believed the first thing someone handed me. I wanted to be angry. God, I wanted to rage. But all I felt was a hollow kind of sorrow, because she wasn't wrong. She had been lonely, afraid, and instead of reaching for me, she reached for the bottle and for lies whispered by someone else. That evening, Daniel called. His voice was steady, but I could hear the satisfaction underneath. Susan's done. Formal misconduct charges are coming. Manipulation, false statements, everything. The evidence is overwhelming. Even the union won't defend her. For the first time, it felt like justice wasn't a fantasy. The next week, Jessica stood before the court for her DUI. Her lawyer struck a deal. Reckless driving instead. Treatment mandatory. License suspended 6 months. Kimberly told me it was common for a first offense with competent counsel. It burned, knowing how close she'd come to killing someone, but I didn't fight it. Ethan didn't need another war. We settled into a fragile rhythm. Ethan with me on weekends and Wednesday nights. Not enough, but at least predictable. His teacher called to say his tears had eased, his focus had sharpened. Still, she told me, he sometimes asked when Mommy and Daddy would be together again. That knife cut deeper than anything. During one joint session, Jessica's therapist suggested we go through her phone together. I didn't expect much. Susan had covered her tracks too well, but then we saw it. A contact, saved under my name. My number, but not mine. Off by 2 digits. Close enough to fool anyone who wasn't looking carefully, especially someone already drowning in alcohol. Jessica's face drained of color. Her hands shook so violently she nearly dropped the phone. She made this when she was here that day. During those 12 minutes, her voice broke. Oh, God. She grabbed my arm. We need to tell my parents. I dialed, handed her the phone, sat in silence as she explained through sobs what we had just uncovered. 20 minutes later, her parents were at the door. Her father took the phone, studied the false contact, the fake thread. His face flushed red, jaw locked tight. Finally, he turned to me. We owe you an apology, he said quietly. For the scene at the station. We thought we were protecting her. We were wrong. I nodded. All that matters now is helping her get better and keeping Ethan safe. Her mother hugged me for the first time in months, whispering, I'm sorry. I believed the worst. The next morning, Daniel called with Internal Affairs' final word. Multiple sustained violations. Evidence tampering, false statements, harassment, conduct unbecoming. She's not fired, but she's finished on the street. Demoted 2 ranks. Records division. Filing paper until retirement. It wasn't the clean severance I'd hoped for, but at least Susan would never again ride a cruiser, never again touch evidence or assignments. 3 days later, a letter circulated at the station. From Susan. A hollow apology to the department, not to me. Poor judgment and unprofessional behavior. Kimberly read it first. Good, she said. No apology to you means no attempt to smooth it over personally. It's an admission of wrongdoing. If you ever want to pursue civil action, this helps. That afternoon, the chief called me into his office. His tone was steady, professional. Starting Monday, you'll return to regular patrol. You'll be paired with Rodriguez. Transfer from the next county. Fresh start. When Rodriguez shook my hand that first day, he didn't look at me with pity or curiosity or gossip in his eyes. He just nodded, grinned faintly, and said, Let's get to work. For the first time in months, the job felt like the job again. Some of the officers still whispered when I walked past, voices dropping as if my shadow carried scandal. But most had seen the evidence. Most knew the truth. And after Susan's demotion, more than a few clapped me on the shoulder, letting me know they stood on my side. The following week, Jessica and I sat across from each other with our lawyers, the conference table a wall of paper between us. We signed a 6-month trial separation agreement, time to see if treatment could steady her, if trust could be pieced back together, or if divorce was inevitable. Jessica's therapist reported steady progress. 3 sober weeks, group participation, accountability. It was the most hope I'd allowed myself in months. Our custody schedule was carved into stone. Ethan with me every other weekend and Wednesday nights, with Jessica having him the rest of the time so long as she remained in treatment and sober. That Saturday, I picked up Ethan. Instead of heavy talks or tense silences, we went back to the lake where I used to take him as a toddler. We bought a cheap bag of bread from the corner store and spent 2 full hours feeding ducks and geese. Ethan laughed when one bold duck snatched bread from his hand, his joy echoing across the water. For the first time in what felt like forever, I saw my son, not as a casualty caught in the middle, but as a child again. Just a boy, carefree, smiling, laughing. He asked if we could come back next weekend. I promised we would, quietly vowing to protect that light in him however I could. On the drive home, he fell asleep in the back seat, his head tilted against the window. I kept my eyes on the road, but my mind wandered through the ruins of the last year. Susan's patterns, so obvious now in hindsight. The volunteered shifts, the friendly touches, the subtle intrusions into my space. A crush that soured into fixation, an infatuation that metastasized into sabotage. I had been too focused on patrol, too determined to ignore the awkwardness, to see how far she'd drifted into obsession. I should have noticed sooner, should have trusted my instincts. That blind spot cost me my marriage, maybe forever. 2 months have passed since the night I cuffed my own wife. Our family doesn't look anything like it once did. Jessica and I live apart. Ethan still asks when things will go back to normal. Maybe they never will. But Jessica is in treatment, working hard to claw her way out of the bottle. I'm back on patrol, no longer the subject of gossip and lies. Susan is chained to a desk in records, stripped of her power to hurt anyone else. And Ethan, my son, is safe, laughing again, piecing back his childhood one Lego castle and lake trip at a time. The truth finally came out. Susan's manipulation, her lies, the cruelty that shattered everything, it was exposed. Not in time to save my marriage, not in time to mend every fracture, but enough to stop her, enough to keep Ethan safe, enough to let me stand again without shame. Sometimes survival is the best ending you get. Not reconciliation, not the perfect picture of a family whole again. Just the wreckage cleared, the danger past, and the fragile chance to move forward. That's how it went for me. And if you've ever been dragged through the fire of lies and betrayal, survival is its own kind of victory.